In 1908, an explosion in Siberia flattened 800 square miles of forest. But here's the weird part: no impact crater was ever found. Was it a meteor, a natural gas explosion, or, as some claim, a failed alien craft crash? This is the mystery of the Tunguska event. On June 30, 1908, something extraordinary happened over Siberia. A bright light lit up the sky. Then came a tremendous explosion that shook the ground for miles around. People felt the blast in their bones as if they had been struck by a whip. All across Siberia, windows were shattered. The airburst was heard as far away as Washington, D.C., and London. It was 3 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. No rock from space, no scorched earth, no spaceship parts. And yet the damage on the ground suggested that something solid had exploded with terrific force. Tall trees were snapped like twigs, small rocks were thrown into the air and deposited on the forest floor like pebbles on a beach. A seismic wave from the explosion traveled around the world twice. It even interfered with telegraph communications for hours. As word spread of this mysterious event, speculation ran wild. Was it a volcano? There are no active volcanoes near Tunguska, an earthquake. So, what could have caused such a massive explosion with no trace of an impact? It wasn't until 20 years later that scientists even began to investigate the Tunguska event. And the first researchers on the scene reported being mystified by what they found. Everything was completely normal, said geologist Viktor Kolpakov. There were no fragments of iron, no melted stones, no burnt earth or boulders or large heaps of rubble. The only sign of anything unusual was an area of crushed trees stretching as far as the eye could see. Then in 1927, Soviet geologist Grigory Asayev stumbled upon something strange while studying maps of the region. He noticed that a lot of the rivers near Tunguska took sharp turns at right angles. He saw that all the rivers seemed to be flowing away from a central point. Something had violently disrupted the landscape, causing for rivers to change course and creating a huge flat plain in the process. But what? Asayev led the first official government expedition to Tunguska in 1927, but the team never found any solid evidence of what caused the cataclysm. According to reports, there was not a single fragment of ironstone or meteorite on the surface. Most of the trees were snapped at a height of between 16 and 50 feet above the ground. Their tops had been stripped away, exposing the white undersides. The diameter of the affected area gradually increased the further they traveled from the epicenter. The trees were crushed in a ring 45 miles in diameter, but only individual trees within a further 340 square mile zone. Outside of that, everything was completely normal. In the immediate vicinity of the epicenter, every tree was destroyed, but beyond that, the trunks of the trees formed a perfect arc shape rising up towards the west. The branches were stripped from the trunks and thrown horizontally into the undergrowth. Further out still, the pattern changed again. Trees were bent and twisted, but mostly intact. Then the devastation started all over again with another ring of crushed trees, and this pattern repeated itself for dozens of miles around the epicenter. Asayev and his team collected samples of wood, soil, and water from the affected area, which were then sent to various laboratories in Moscow and Leningrad. The scientists concluded that the samples contained nothing unusual. However, according to one version of events, Asayev tried to cover up what he really found. He returned to Tunguska several times over the next few decades and confiscated any specimens of crashed aircraft or other space debris brought to him by local residents. These stories are disputed, however, and Asayev's records were lost in the chaos of World War II. What is certain is that the final report of his 1927 expedition made no mention of the possibility of a meteor. Instead, it blamed the destruction on a force of nature unknown at the time. Another expedition was mounted in 1934, but once again turned up nothing conclusive. By this time, the story had become a sensation in the West, and rumors were spreading of an alien spaceship that had crashed to Earth and been covered up by the Soviet authorities. During World War II, the site became a military training ground and access was strictly forbidden. But after the war, people started to return to the area. They found strange objects protruding from the ground, including a boulder weighing several tons that had been turned on its side. There were also thousands of small pebbles scattered around the epicenter, which were not there before the event. Some were made of quartz, others of granite, and some contained gold. Fragments of wood from the surrounding forests were discovered 250 miles away, while melted rock was found 450 miles from the blast zone. In 1963, two Russian scientists named Zelinsky and Shvetsov revisited the site and came to the conclusion that the explosion was most likely caused by a meteor. Others weren't so sure. Geologist Kaya Polikarpova argued that the explosion may have been caused by a combination of natural factors, including a buildup of methane gas in the shallow lake, followed by a massive volcanic eruption in the region. But these ideas did little to explain why all the trees were stripped of their branches and foliage, nor why the ground was covered with pebbles and metallic fragments. In 1969, Soviet nuclear physicist Andrei Sakharov came up with a different theory. He believed that the Tunguska event was the result of a nuclear reaction between ordinary uranium and the crust of the Earth. This idea was based on the fact that the explosion had taken place in an area particularly rich in uranium deposits. But this theory was widely dismissed because it failed to explain how the energy from the reaction was released. In the 1990s, new investigations revealed that the rocks in the epicenter contained abnormally high levels of radioactive elements. This was especially true of the humic acids found in the humus layer of the soil. Such acids contain organic matter and carbon that is accumulated in the soil from decayed plants. But these acids also contain extractable thorium dioxide and radioactive elements such as zirconium, niobium, palladium, and cesium. The cesium isotopes found in the soil were produced during the nuclear fission of uranium and plutonium, but not by nuclear fusion as in a hydrogen bomb. So Sakharov's hypothesis that the explosion was caused by a nuclear reaction between uranium. But what about the crater? If a meteor had exploded, wouldn't it have left a permanent scar on the land? Well, perhaps it did, but it may have been filled in by now. Leonid Kulik, the director of the Siberian Institute of Geology and Exploitation of Precious Metals, believes that the Tunguska event was caused by a meteor that exploded 4 to 6 miles above the ground. This would explain why there was no crater. The meteor may have vaporized on impact with the atmosphere, or it may have left a transient crater that quickly filled with water. There is evidence to support this theory, including an aerial photograph taken in 1928 that shows a faint circular depression surrounded by higher ground. Could this really be the missing crater? Perhaps, but we may never know for sure. After all, the Tunguska event happened 115 years ago. A lot can happen in more than a century. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and the shifting of tectonic plates could have easily erased any remaining evidence of the impact. The reason we're still arguing about what caused the Tunguska event is because we don't have enough data to come to a definitive conclusion. We do know that something exploded in the sky over Siberia in 1908, and we know that it was one of the largest explosions in recorded history. But we don't know what that something was or where it came from. Until we find more evidence, the Tunguska event will continue to be one of the greatest mysteries of modern history. Now you need to watch what actually happened to the first astronaut in space, or have a look at this.